The sun glistened off the rushing river, its golden streaks dancing like promise and peril in the heart of the Old West. Sam Harlow, a rugged gold miner with calloused hands and a determined gaze, had just struck a promising vein outside Prosper Gulch, yet fate had another discovery in store that day. A woman, tattered clothes drenched in water, a gash across her forehead, floated by, clinging to a scrap of driftwood. In a heartbeat, Sam plunged into the freezing current to save her. Little did he know this rescue would spark a whirlwind of danger and deception, upending his life overnight. The settlement of Prosper Gulch, nestled between rolling hills and towering pines, had once been a quiet stagecoach stop on the outskirts of the Wyoming Territory. But when a whisper of gold drifted into nearby towns, prospectors flocked to the region, staking claims in every creek and canyon. Wooden shacks shot up overnight. Creaky saloons offered cheap whiskey and tall tales. Gambling dens lured in men with the promise of fast fortunes. A rough road cut through the valley, swirling dust into the air every time a wagon rumbled by. Life here felt raw, uncertain, yet the promise of wealth shimmered like a mirage no one could resist. Sam Harlow came to Prosper Gulch with his father's old pickaxe slung over his shoulder and a battered map in hand. He was a lean man of 30, with strong arms from years of cutting through stubborn quartz. Since boyhood, gold had fascinated him. His father had never found enough to retire, but had passed on the knowledge and grit required to keep digging until the mother lode revealed itself. A year in Sam's efforts had proven meager flecks in the pan, the occasional nugget nothing to shout about. Each failure brought him closer to packing up and leaving. Yet something about Prosper Gulch always made him stay. Perhaps it was the endless expanse of pine forests, or the wide-open sky at dusk that wrapped the land in purple and gold. The wild frontier called to his restless heart, compelling him to hold fast to his dream of independence and fortune. He rose before dawn each day and trudged through rocky trails to a remote creek where he'd set up a makeshift sluice. On that fateful morning, he discovered a glittering swirl at the bottom of his pan that took his breath away. Amid the swirling gravel, tiny flecks caught the first rays of sunlight. His heart pounded. If this was real, if the vein upstream was substantial, it could change his life. Maybe he could afford a proper claim marker, hire a couple of workers, and stake out a larger territory. Dreams swelled in his mind like a breaking wave. Yet he knew better than to blurt his luck around town. In a place like Prosper Gulch, secrets had a shorter lifespan than a gambler's last dollar. Saloons teemed with cunning opportunists ready to jump another man's claim at the slightest hint of success. So Sam practiced caution. He covered his sluice. He spread debris over the shimmering spot in the creek bed. Then he hiked back with an excitement that warmed his entire body, resolved to confirm the find at first light the next day. On his return, the dusty trail guided him along the river, the water's roar offering a reassuring sense of solitude. He was thinking about how he'd quietly purchase supplies from the general store, maybe under the pretense of a new hunting trip. He even considered traveling to a bigger town like Cheyenne or Laramie to lodge official papers for his claim. These thoughts raced through his head, overshadowing the usual wariness that helped a man survive in the frontier. Just as the sun began to sink behind the hills, Sam heard a muffled splash. He paused. Branches snapped further upstream. Then he saw the woman clinging to a battered log, the strong current threatening to drag her under. Without a moment's hesitation, Sam tossed his pickaxe aside and splashed in, ignoring the icy jolt of water. As he swam closer, he noticed the woman was unconscious or close to it. A deep cut on her forehead trickled blood into the swirling foam. By the time he tugged her to the safety of the riverbank. Sam's heart hammered from more than just exertion. Her face was pale, her breathing faint. Some distant part of him realized that if he'd arrived a few minutes later, she would have been gone. Wrapping his oilcloth coat around her shivering body, Sam gently patted her cheek, hoping she'd come to. Instead, she remained limp cold as the swirling breeze. There was no choice but to carry her back to his cabin, unaware that this single act of courage would ignite a chain of events that would threaten everything he held dear. Sam's cabin stood on the edge of a pine thicket, a small single-room structure fashioned from rough-hewn logs. That night, after laying the woman on his modest cot, he hurried to stoke the fireplace. The flickering flames revealed her features, high cheekbones, dark lashes, and a stubborn set to her mouth. She appeared in her mid-20s, hair damp and tangled. Her dress, once fine material, was torn and stained with mud. Whoever she wasn't just another traveling widow or settler. She had an air of refinement, like someone who didn't belong to these harsh frontier surroundings. Sam retrieved a clean rag, soaking it in a basin of warm water. He washed the cut on her forehead, which refused to stop bleeding. Panic gnawed at him. Medical care in Prosper Gulch was rudimentary at best, typically an old trapper who doubled as a barber and dabbled in herbal cures. But a gut feeling told Sam that taking her into town right now might endanger her further. If she was on the run from someone, or if her appearance sparked rumor of fortune trouble would come knocking fast. The best he could do was dress her wound, keep her warm, and pray she'd awaken. Throughout the night, she drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring incoherently. Once her eyes opened a sliver. She tried to speak only to be racked by a violent cough. Sam helped her sip a bit of water. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, telling her she was safe. She blinked dazedly, as if uncertain whether to trust him. Then she drifted off again. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, rattling the tiny window shutters. Sam sat in his single chair near the fire, exhaustion weighing on him. He kept replaying the rescue in his mind, wondering what had led this stranger to the river. Robbery. A stagecoach accident. Maybe an ambush. He let the questions swirl until the warmth of the fire lulled him into a brief, uneasy doze. Dawn arrived in a wash of pale gold. Sam jolted awake to see the woman stirring her gaze more alert. She attempted to push herself upright and immediately winced. The pain etched across her face worried him. "Easy," he said, softly moving to support her back. "You took a rough tumble in that river." Her eyes darted around the cabin before settling on him. "Where am I? Just outside Prosper Gulch. I found you in the water yesterday evening." She swallowed, her throat clearly raw. "I thank you." The words were hesitant, and her eyes searched his face as if trying to discern his intentions. "You're safe here," Sam assured her. "Name's Sam Harlow." She paused, then pressed her lips together. "I'm Grace," she managed, voice trembling. "Grace Stanford." Sam tried not to let the flicker of surprise show on his face. The name Stanford wasn't entirely unfamiliar, though he couldn't place it immediately. Perhaps he'd heard it in passing in some saloon or from traveling merchants. "All right, Miss Stanford," he said gently. "You need rest. There's broth and some bread if you can keep it down." Grace slowly nodded, and he helped her sip the lukewarm broth. After a few mouthfuls, she sank back onto the cot, eyelids fluttering. They'll come for me," she whispered. Tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. Sam wasn't sure who they were, but he didn't like the dread in her voice. "We'll worry about that when you're stronger," he replied. "I'm not about to let anyone drag you off against your will." A ghost of gratitude shimmered across her face, followed by fatigue. She closed her eyes, sinking into a fragile rest. Sam, unsettled, slid into his chair, mind racing. He recognized that name Stanford as belonging to a powerful railroad and political dynasty. Leland Stanford, one of the wealthiest men in the country, had extensive business in the West. If Grace was part of that family, trouble wasn't just coming, it was guaranteed to arrive with guns drawn and pockets lined with bribes. Sam's chest tightened. In the raw lawlessness of Prosper Gulch, no frontier justice or sheriff's badge would stand in the way of big money. He stared at the battered front door, as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. He had no illusions. Men who came looking for a Stanford heiress wouldn't hesitate to dispatch a solitary gold miner. And if Sam was to keep Grace safe and himself alive, he needed a plan, and fast. Days passed in tense seclusion. Sam did his best to nurse Grace back to health. Although her fever subsided, the gash on her forehead scabbed over into an angry red line. Each morning, she'd awaken with a slightly clearer memory, though fear lingered in her eyes like a dark shadow. Sam would gently prompt her for details, but she only recalled fragments: a perilous journey, an ambush along the stage route, and an escape that culminated in her tumbling into the river. Meanwhile, Sam juggled two pressing needs: caring for Grace in secret and investigating who might already be hunting her. Each trip into Prosper Gulch required stealth. He took to visiting the general store at odd hours, purchasing meager supplies so as not to attract attention. He overheard rumors of a battered stagecoach found on the far side of the gorge, riddled with bullets. The driver's seat was splashed with blood, but there was no sign of any passengers. The local talk pinned it on outlaws or maybe some feud. No one mentioned a survivor, which was both reassuring and ominous. Grace's strength returned enough for her to sit up and talk more steadily. Each day, Sam would check her bandages, feed her, then inquire carefully about her background. She finally confessed one afternoon, her voice trembling. "Sam, I'm not just any Stanford. Leland Stanford is my uncle. I was traveling under a false name, so no one would target me. But they found me anyway. My father, Henry Stanford, recently died, leaving me with a significant trust inheritance and some powerful enemies as well." Sam frowned. He'd heard enough to know the Stanfords were entwined in railroad expansion, land deals, and political influence. "Why were you out here in the territory?" he asked gently. She took a shaky breath. "I was investigating some of my father's holdings, mines, and land claims. I didn't trust the reports I was getting from his associates. Too many discrepancies. So I boarded a stagecoach incognito to see for myself. Someone found out. The ambush. I barely escaped with my life." The more she spoke, the more Sam realized just how dangerous her situation was. If unscrupulous business partners or corrupt politicians wanted to silence Grace, they had the means to hire mercenaries or bribe lawmen. Small wonder she feared they were coming. In these remote mining camps, gold seekers were easily swayed by a fistful of dollars or the promise of a big payoff. He knelt beside her cot, voice low. "I won't let them take you, Grace. But we need to figure out our next steps. Staying here long might be a risk." Her face softened. "Thank you, Sam. You've done so much already, saving me, feeding me. I never expected to find kindness in these wild lands." Sam flushed awkward with praise. Anyone with a lick of decency would do the same. She offered a thin smile. Sadly, that's not always true in a place where wealth is everything. They fell into a thoughtful silence, the crackle of the hearth the only sound. Sam mulled over the few allies he had in Prosper Gulch. There was an old miner named Rufus Calloway, a friend of Sam's late father. Another was Mary Beaumont, who ran a boarding house with a stern manner, but a heart of gold. And perhaps the only man with any real moral authority was Pastor Dillon, a traveling preacher who held Sunday gatherings behind the saloon. If Sam were to create a network of safe havens for Grace, these three were his best bets. Yet fear gnawed at the edges of his mind. With every hour that passed, word might spread of Grace's presence. If the wrong ears caught wind, a gang of hired guns could show up. Sam had no illusions about the extent of corruption in these parts. Even the local sheriff might be in someone's pocket if the price was right. The memory of that glimmer in his gold pan flashed across Sam's thoughts, his own modest dream overshadowed by Grace's precarious fate. Finally he stood and looked toward the shuttered window. "We'll keep you hidden a bit longer," he said firmly. "I need to gather some information in town. If you're feeling strong enough by the time I return, we'll make plans to leave Prosper Gulch." She nodded, expression conflicted. "I hate to uproot your life, Sam." "It's already uprooted," he answered quietly, thinking of the secret gold vein. "But some things are worth fighting for." That settled it. As Grace closed her eyes to rest, Sam grabbed his coat, making sure his revolver was loaded. A sense of foreboding pressed upon him. He felt certain that from the moment he rescued Grace, an invisible target painted itself on his back, one that would only grow more dangerous once the world learned exactly who she was. 2 days later, Sam rode into Prosper Gulch, astride a borrowed horse from a neighboring miner who owed him a favor. The main street was dusty as ever, a motley parade of wagons, gamblers, and prospectors weaving about. Saloons loomed like sirens, offering respite and ruin in equal measure. Sam tugged his hat low, avoiding prolonged eye contact with anyone who might glean his nervousness. His first stop was the general store, a wide, splintery place run by Charlotte DeWitt, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes who missed nothing. She glanced up when Sam entered, her features twisting into a wary smile. "Morning, Sam. You look like you've been sleeping under the stars. I've been busy at my claim," he replied vaguely. He picked out some tins of beans, a fresh spool of bandages, and a small pouch of flour. "You're going through a lot of bandages lately," Charlotte remarked. Her tone held a hint of curiosity. "Everything all right?" Sam forced a shrug. "Work accident, just trying to be prepared." He slid a few coins across the counter. "Anyone new come through town recently?" She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "A couple of men arrived yesterday, well-dressed, riding fine horses. Seemed mighty interested in the stagecoach attack. I overheard them asking the sheriff if anyone survived. They also inquired if a woman's body was found." Sam's throat tightened. "And what did the sheriff say?" Charlotte drummed her fingers on the countertop. "Said no bodies were recovered. These men seemed riled about it. They're staying at the Golden Nugget Saloon. Rumor is they've flashed some big money around, paying folks for information." The implication hung in the air. Sam thanked her, collected his supplies, and exited with a polite tip of his hat. A knot of dread settled in his gut. Clearly, Grace's assailants had set up shop in Prosper Gulch. They'd soon be sniffing around like wolves. He didn't linger. Next, he visited Mary Beaumont's boarding house. It was a 2-story affair, sagging slightly but kept impeccably clean. Mary herself answered the door, her hair in a tight bun, apron starched to perfection. When she saw Sam, her lips curved in a subdued smile. "Sam Harlow. Haven't seen you in days. You look thin. Sit down, I'll fetch some coffee." Over a cup of weak coffee, he told her a carefully edited version of the truth. He'd rescued a wounded traveler and needed a place for her to convalesce away from prying eyes. Mary's stern gaze studied him, her motherly instincts warring with caution. "Sam," she said softly, "are you sure you know what you're getting into?" He shook his head. Honest. "No. But I can't just throw her to the wolves." She sighed. "You always were too kind for your own good. I have a back storeroom used to keep extra linens and supplies. No one will suspect a thing. I can stash her there if you want." Sam exhaled relief. "That'd be a blessing." Mary laid a hand over his. "But understand, if trouble comes knocking, I'll do what I must to protect my own. So keep this quiet." A surge of gratitude filled him. "You have my word, Mary." He left the boarding house with a sense of progress. If Mary could shelter Grace, it would give them time to plan the next move. But Sam still needed more information about these mysterious pursuers. With his heart pounding, he decided to head to the Golden Nugget Saloon. If the men Charlotte spoke of were lodging there, perhaps Sam could catch a glimpse or even overhear their plans. The saloon was a rowdy den of gambling, drinking, and the occasional brawl. Dim lanterns glowed along the walls, and a rickety piano plinked out a jaunty tune. Sam sidled up to the bar, ordering a shot of whiskey he didn't really want. Over the din of conversation, he tuned his ears to bits of gossip. A group of card players gabbled about missing gold shipments and new claims. Another table chatted about the stagecoach ambush. Sam's gaze flicked around until he spotted 2 men in tailored suits sitting at a corner table. One was tall and gaunt, with slicked-back hair. The other short and stocky with a neatly trimmed beard. Their boots were polished, their eyes cold. Each nursed a bottle of top-shelf bourbon. Leaning closer, Sam tried to pass their low conversation. He caught snatches. No sign of her body. Must still be alive. "We can't return to Mr. Jameson empty-handed." The name Jameson didn't ring a bell, but Sam guessed it might be one of Grace's unscrupulous relatives or a hired agent. A swirling fear coiled in Sam's chest. Grace might face an even larger conspiracy than she realized. Sam paid for his whiskey and slipped out. He had enough to act. If these men were already paying for leads, then soon they'd know about a reclusive gold miner who recently bought extra bandages. Sam decided not to linger in town. He saddled up the horse and rode hard for his cabin mindset on one urgent task, ensuring Grace was well enough to move tonight. Darkness draped the pine forest when Sam returned to the cabin. Grace stood by the small window, pale moonlight illuminating the worry etched on her face. She turned as he entered, relief washing over her features. "You were gone so long," she breathed. He set the supplies down and lit a lantern. "We've got a problem, Grace. The men who attacked your stage, some of them are in town. They're looking for you." Her lips parted in alarm. "What do we do?" Sam quickly explained Mary Beaumont's offer of shelter. "You'll be safer there, hidden among the borders. It's not perfect, but it's better than staying out here alone if I have to leave for any reason. If we're careful, no one will suspect Mary's got you in a locked storeroom." Grace nodded, though her exhaustion showed. "Let's go now." under cover of darkness. They packed only the essentials. Sam gave Grace one of his old hats and a coat that swallowed her figure, hoping it might mask her identity as they traveled by horse. The gash on her forehead still throbbed beneath a fresh bandage, but she clenched her jaw in resolve. Moonlight guided them along a narrow trail through the trees. The air was crisp, scented with pine and damp earth. Every rustle of the underbrush set Sam's nerves on edge. He kept a hand near his revolver eyes, scanning for the slightest sign of pursuit. The plan was to slip into Prosper Gulch from the eastern side, avoiding the main thoroughfare. Mary's boarding house lay near the edge of town, making it easier to remain unseen. The old horse snorted as they approached the outskirts. Above them, a waxing moon cast silver light across rickety rooftops. The hush of late night blanketed the settlement, broken only by the occasional drunken shout from the saloon or the jingle of a passing wagon. Sam led Grace to a small alley behind the boarding house, rapped gently on a side door. Moments later, Mary cracked it open, holding a shuttered lantern that revealed only a sliver of light. "Come in quick," she murmured, ushering them inside. "Everyone else is asleep upstairs." They moved through a narrow corridor stacked with crates and linens. Mary opened a low door that revealed a cramped storeroom. "It's not fancy," she warned in a whisper, "but there's a cot enough space to lie low." Grace offered a quiet thank you, her eyes welling with grateful tears as she slipped inside. Sam felt guilt and relief mingling in equal measure. "I'll be by in the morning," he promised. "Mary, if anyone comes snooping," she pressed her lips together, "I'll say nothing." Then her voice grew firm. "But watch your back, Sam. If they figure out you're hiding her—" Sam nodded grimly. "I will." "Thank you, Mary." Without further ado, he eased back out into the night. He stabled the horse at a friend's place, paying him extra to remain discreet. Then, not wanting to linger in the boarding house where a nighttime male guest might draw questions, Sam bunked at an abandoned shack on the far edge of town. Sleep came fitfully haunted by anxious visions of armed men kicking down doors. At daybreak, Sam returned to check on Grace. Mary discreetly ushered him upstairs to a tiny parlor adjoining her own quarters. There he found Grace sipping a cup of tea, looking a bit more composed, although dark shadows rimmed her eyes. Mary explained, "I decided the storeroom was a bit too chilly. I figured I could hide her better up here near my own room. That way I can keep a closer watch." She winked at Grace. "Also, a lady deserves a bit of comfort." Grace managed a shy smile, her voice soft. "Your kindness overwhelms me." "Thank you, Mary." Sam sat down, exhaling tension. "Any sign of trouble?" he asked, scanning the room for signs of forced entry or disturbance. Mary shook her head. "Not yet. Those men from the Golden Nugget haven't come around. But watchfulness is key." Grace looked to Sam, her expression serious. "We can't hide forever. What's our plan?" He wished he had a better answer. The best idea forming in his mind involved traveling to Cheyenne, where the authorities might actually protect Grace if her family name carried weight. But that journey was long and fraught with danger. Alternatively, he considered going deeper into the wilderness, forging a path through passes unknown to the average traveler. That would mean giving up any chance of contacting her powerful relatives unless they found a trusted telegraph station. "We have options," he started carefully. "Cheyenne is a day's ride for a fast stage, but we can't risk the standard routes. Another possibility is heading north toward Montana, lying low until the heat dies down." Grace pursed her lips as if weighing each possibility. I need to contact my uncle's lawyer or a family ally. But until I know who's behind the ambush, I can't trust the usual channels." Her voice trembled with frustration. "I can't believe one of my father's associates would stoop to murder. But the evidence suggests otherwise." A tense pause followed, broken only by Mary clearing her throat. "Well," she said, "let's not do anything rash. Gather supplies, think it through. You both are welcome here for now. I'll do my best to keep your presence secret." Sam and Grace exchanged grateful glances. For a brief, quiet moment, the terror of their circumstances receded, replaced by a shared sense of camaraderie. Yet Sam sensed that time was slipping away. Each hour they spent in Prosper Gulch increased the odds that someone would sniff out the truth. Still, for now, they were safe. For now. Word spread quietly but relentlessly. In the dusty streets, a strange intensity had settled over the Golden Nugget Saloon. Locals whispered that the two well-dressed men had been joined by a third, a tall, broad-shouldered fellow with a scar running down one side of his jaw. This newcomer was rumored to be a Pinkerton detective or some private gun for hire, though no one knew for certain. All they knew was that large sums of money were being offered for any lead on a missing woman from the Stagecoach ambush. Sam spent the next 2 days laying low, sneaking in and out of Mary's boarding house to check on Grace's health. He brought her updates on the ground situation, always with a wary glance over his shoulder. Tension brewed like a thunderstorm on the horizon. Twice, Sam noticed strangers lingering around the outskirts of the boarding house. Once he spotted a man in a black coat, scanning faces in the local eatery. Every time, Sam's heart lurched, wondering if the noose was tightening. On the third afternoon, trouble arrived. Sam had just slipped into the boarding house's side entrance when Mary stopped him in the corridor, her eyes wide. "They're here," she whispered. "Those well-dressed fellows. They're downstairs asking questions about a missing woman and a gold miner who's been buying bandages." Sam's blood ran cold. "Where's Grace?" "She's in the back parlor, hidden behind the storage hutch. But we have to get her out. They bribed one of my boarders for information. I can't stall them forever." Sam cursed under his breath. "You hide them, I'll create a distraction." Mary nodded, her jaw set with resolve. "Go carefully." He crept to the back parlor. Grace stood there, already tense, as though she sensed the danger. Without a word, Sam gestured for her to follow. They slipped out through a narrow hallway that led to the kitchen. Voices echoed from the foyer, stern, insistent voices demanding answers. Mary's polite but curt tone responded, "I run a proper house, gentlemen. I'll thank you not to barge in uninvited." Sam hurried Grace through the kitchen door to an external stairway that descended to the yard. Outside, the autumn sun glared, illuminating every corner. If any watchers were stationed there, they'd be easily spotted. Sam scanned the area, heart pounding. No sign of onlookers. They crept toward the back gate. Suddenly, a figure in a black coat appeared around the corner of the house, eyes narrowing at the sight of them. Sam recognized the scar-faced man from the saloon rumors. The man's hand drifted to his holster. Sam grabbed Grace's wrist, whispered, "Run!" They bolted out into the alley. Scarface shouted, "Stop!" and gave chase. Adrenaline surged in Sam's veins as they dodged crates and leaped over a broken wagon wheel. Gunshots rang out, splintering the fence. The stench of gunpowder thickened the air. Ahead, the narrow alley opened onto Main Street, teeming with midday traffic. If they made it there, maybe they could disappear in the crowd. They dashed onto Main Street, nearly colliding with a horse-drawn cart. Grace stumbled, but Sam yanked her upright. Behind them, Scarface shouldered past startled townsfolk brandishing his revolver. People shrieked, diving for cover. Sam's mind worked at lightning speed. They needed a horse or a wagon to make a clean getaway. He spotted one across the street, a tired mare tied outside the general store. With no time for niceties, Sam hauled Grace over, unlooped the reins, and swung onto the saddle, pulling her up behind him. Scarface fired again, the bullet whistling past Sam's hat. Sam kicked the horse's flanks, urging it into a gallop down the street. Heart hammering, he guided the animal around startled pedestrians, ignoring their shouts of outrage. Behind hooves thundered as Scarface or his cohorts mounted in pursuit. They raced out of Prosper Gulch, the dusty road stretching ahead. Gunfire cracked, and Sam felt a jolt near his boot splinters. Flew as a bullet struck the ground. He leaned low, urging the mare to push harder. The distance between them and the pursuers shrank with every second. Desperation seized Sam. He veered off the main road into a rocky trail that wound through boulders and narrow passes. The horse snorted in protest as they navigated the uneven path. Shots continued to echo, but the angles were trickier here. The rocky outcroppings offered some cover. At last, they emerged at a fork in the trail. Without hesitation, Sam steered the horse onto the lesser-known path that snaked toward an abandoned mining camp. A final crack of gunfire whizzed overhead. Then came the thunder of hooves fading behind them. Sam glanced back, saw no sign of immediate pursuit. He exhaled every muscle, shaking uncertain if they'd truly lost them. Grace clung to him, her breathing ragged. "You all right?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded numbly, eyes wide with terror. "That was too close." Sam forced a grim smile. "We can't go back to Prosper Gulch now. They'll comb every inch. We need to keep moving." She swallowed, tears threatening. "Where will we go?" He glanced around, surveying the rugged landscape. "I know a place, an old abandoned miner's shack up in the hills. We can lay low, regroup, then figure out our next move." Grace squeezed his arm, her expression torn between terror and trust. "Lead the way, Sam. I'm with you." And so they set off, deeper into the wilderness, fugitives from a merciless conspiracy that had every resource at its disposal. The Old West had always tested one's fortitude, but now Sam and Grace were in a deadlier game, one where survival depended on swift wit's cunning and the tenuous thread of an alliance forged in the swirling waters of a perilous river rescue. A grey dusk settled over the pine-covered hills as Sam guided the mare through a maze of winding trails. The terrain grew rougher, the sparse undergrowth turning into thick brambles in places. Finally, they emerged onto a rocky plateau, where a single dilapidated shack stood half-hidden by looming boulders. The roof sagged, and the porch leaned precariously, but it was shelter. Sam dismounted, helping Grace down. Exhaustion showed in her every movement. He tethered the mare in a patch of grass near a tiny spring that trickled from the rocks. "This used to be a claim my father worked for a spell," he explained, pushing open the crooked door. Inside lay an old cot, a crumbling stone fireplace, and scattered remnants of a miner's life, rusted tools, broken crates. Grace stepped in cautiously. "Better than the open road," she murmured, folding her arms. The terror of the chase still clung to them like dust. Sam could see it in her trembling hands. They spent the next hour gathering firewood and making a small meal from the supplies Sam had managed to tuck in his saddlebag, some jerked meat hardtack biscuits and leftover coffee grounds. The warmth of the fire offered a semblance of comfort in the encroaching darkness. Seated on the floor near the flickering flames, Grace finally broke the silence. I can't believe how quickly everything spiraled. Just days ago, I was on a stagecoach thinking I might quietly investigate my father's holdings. Now I'm a fugitive, hunted by men who want me dead. Sam sighed, prodding the coals with a stick. The frontier can be merciless. But we'll find a way through this. Once we're sure who to trust, we can seek help from your uncle or a lawyer who's not in anyone's pocket. Grace nodded, though her eyes still carried worry. I hope so. My father always preached that money could solve most problems, but money seems to be at the root of this danger. He gently rested a hand on her shoulder. Greed is a powerful thing, but so are loyalty and decency. We'll cling to those. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by the crackling fire. Then Grace brushed away a tear. "Sam," she whispered, "why did you risk your life to save me?" He considered her question. Finally, he answered simply, "I couldn't let an innocent woman drown. I grew up believing we help those in need, no matter who they are. And once I realized who you were, how much danger you faced, I couldn't just walk away." She studied him with a mixture of gratitude and awe. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling with sincerity. "From the bottom of my heart, thank you." For a brief moment, their gazes locked, an unspoken understanding passing between them, an alliance deeper than circumstance. Then Sam cleared his throat, returning his attention to the fire. They took turns resting in fitful sleep. The wind outside howled through cracks in the shack, setting the rotting timbers groaning. Sometime in the early hours, Sam rose to reinforce the door with a Swiss plank, mindful that if Scarface tracked them here, it would at least slow him down. Morning came with pale sunshine filtering through the dusty windows. Sam unwrapped the bandage on Grace's forehead. The cut looked better, though it left a stark red line. They ate a sparse breakfast of coffee and leftover biscuits. Then Sam stepped outside to scout the surroundings. From atop a boulder, he peered down the winding trails below, searching for any sign of riders. The landscape lay silent and still, only distant hawks circling overhead. Returning inside, he found Grace lost in thought, running her fingers over a battered photograph she kept in a small tin. She glanced up at him. "It's my father," she explained. "I keep it to remind me why I'm fighting. He was a complicated man, kind, yet driven. He told me never to back down from the truth." Sam nodded, touched by the vulnerability in her eyes. "Then let's do what we must. We'll wait here a day or two, see if the men from Prosper Gulch are still hunting. If we can slip past them, maybe we can head toward Cheyenne." Grace inhaled deeply, fortifying herself. "Right. Let's do that." With the plan set, Sam ventured out periodically over the next day, checking trails, listening for hoofbeats. Each time, the wilderness remained quiet. It was an uneasy calm, the lull before another storm. But it gave them time to mend their wounds, catch some rest, and strategize. In snatches of conversation, Grace revealed more details about her father's wealth, how certain unscrupulous figures might benefit from her death or from forcing her to sign over claims. Sam's mind reeled at the complexities of power plays he couldn't fully comprehend. All he knew was that these men had the resources to keep coming, and the frontier offered nowhere truly safe unless they outran them or fought back. By the second evening, Sam resolved they should break camp at dawn, risk the road. Danger stalked them here too. If discovered, they'd be cornered like animals in this old shack. Better to keep moving even if it meant traveling at first light. As Grace dozed, Sam sat by the door, revolver in hand, grappling with the weight of what lay ahead. Once he'd only sought a modest fortune in gold to carve out a living. Now he was embroiled in a high-stakes conspiracy with the heiress of the Stanford name. Fate had twisted their paths together, forging a bond that could shatter under the next volley of gunfire, or emerge stronger if they survived the trials of the Old West. At the break of dawn, Sam and Grace mounted the old mare. The air was crisp, each breath a visible puff. They rode carefully down the rocky paths, winding through pine groves and boulder-strewn slopes, aiming east toward the route that eventually connected with Cheyenne. Sam kept scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. By noon, they reached a narrow canyon where a trickling stream ran alongside a wagon trail. The walls rose steeply on either side, offering precious little cover if ambushed. Sam slowed the mare, tension coiling in his gut. They had to pass through. There was no alternative route for miles. Halfway through the canyon, a voice echoed off the walls. "Don't move." Sam's pulse spiked. 3 men emerged from behind boulders. At the center stood Scarface, a cruel grin twisting his features. One of his companions was the tall, gaunt man from the Golden Nugget. The other was short and stocky, the one with the tidy beard. All had their guns drawn. Grace gasped, gripping Sam's waist. Sam raised his hands slowly. "We don't want trouble," he said, though he knew it was futile. Scarface spat on the ground. "Well, that's too bad, because trouble found you." He looked at Grace, eyes hungry with malice. "There's a sizable reward for bringing you in, lady. Alive or dead." Sam's heart pounded. "What do you want from her?" The short-bearded man barked a bitter laugh. "That's none of your concern, Miner. Let's just say she's worth a fortune to some powerful people. Now hand her over." Sam's mind raced. Even if he tried to draw his revolver, they'd be riddled with bullets in an instant. He needed a distraction, something. Then from above, a loud crack split the air. A bullet ricocheted off the canyon wall near Scarface's feet. The 3 men spun, cursing, seeking cover. Another shot rang out, and the gaunt man's gun flew from his hand as if slapped away by an invisible force. A voice boomed from the top of the canyon. "Drop your weapons!" Sam craned his neck. Above, silhouetted against the sky, stood a figure in a battered coat and wide-brimmed hat, rifle trained on the ambushes. He recognized the stance Rufus Calloway, his father's old friend. The muzzle of Rufus's rifle gleamed menacingly, smoke curling from the barrel. Scarface snarled. "Who the hell are you?" Rufus didn't waver. "A better shot than you, apparently." "Now I said drop 'em." Realizing they were pinned, the 3 men hesitated. Then Scarface motioned for them to stand down. They tossed their guns aside, glaring daggers up at Rufus. Sam seized the moment, swiftly drawing his revolver to cover them from below. "Get off the trail," Sam ordered, voice shaking with adrenaline. "Now!" The men obeyed, stepping away from their weapons. Rufus scrambled down a precarious path to join Sam and Grace, rifle still raised. Up close, Sam saw Rufus had aged since they'd last spoken, deep lines around his eyes' grizzled hair. But the old spark remained. "Sam, guess I arrived just in time," he said, half smiling. "Heard rumors in Prosper Gulch that you were in trouble. Figured you might need a hand." Sam couldn't speak for a moment, relief and gratitude overwhelming him. Grace managed a hushed "thank you." Rufus tipped his hat to her. "Ma'am, you're safe now." Scarface glowered. "You can't hide her forever." People bigger than you are paying good money to see her dead. Rufus aimed the rifle. Get going before I change my mind. The three men exchanged murderous looks, but were forced to retreat, their weapons left behind. They disappeared around a bend in the canyon, presumably to regroup or find reinforcements. Sam knew this was only a temporary victory. Once they were out of sight, Rufus exhaled. You've stirred a hornet's nest, Sam. Let's move fast. They hurried along the canyon until they reached a more open expanse where Rufus had tethered his own horse. There they paused to catch their breath and decide what came next. I have a place we can hole up, Rufus offered, adjusting the strap on his rifle. A ranch house a few miles from here belongs to my cousin. She's away for the season. It's remote secure. Sam looked to Grace, who nodded. Please, she said, her voice unsteady. We need somewhere safe. Together they set off again, forging across rolling hills. The sun began to slip toward the horizon by the time they spotted the ranch house, a sturdy structure of timber and stone nestled in a secluded valley. Rufus guided them inside, showing them a modest kitchen, a couple of bedrooms, and most importantly, a solid door with reinforced locks. As they settled in, Sam finally mustered the courage to ask the question that gnawed at him. Rufus, why'd you come looking for me? The old miner ran a hand through his unkempt beard. Well, word in town said you'd rescued a mysterious lady, and some wealthy men were after her. Then Mary Beaumont told me she feared for your life. Mary's good folk. She said if I had any loyalty to your pa, I'd step in. He shrugged. That's all I needed to hear. Sam felt a surge of emotion. The Old West was harsh, but it thrived on loyalty and old friendships. I owe you everything, Rufus. Rufus brushed it off. Let's first see we make it out alive. The men we faced today are just the start. They'll send more. And from the talk I've heard, some big names might be pulling the strings. Grace set her jaw. Whoever they are, I refuse to bow to them. My father's legacy won't be stolen by murderers. Rufus gave her a curt nod of respect. Atta girl. We'll hold them off somehow. Yet as night fell once again, Sam felt a foreboding sense of inevitability. The next confrontation would likely be bigger and deadlier, and this time no unexpected ally might be lurking above the canyon. The ranch house had become a fortress overnight. Sam, Grace, and Rufus worked by lamplight to barricade windows, reinforce doors, and ready every firearm they had. Rufus even strung tin cans around the perimeter. Any rustle would sound the alarm. At dawn, a blood-red sky hung over the valley. Sam stood near a shuttered window revolver, close eyes heavy from little sleep. Grace hovered beside him, quiet but resolute. Across the room, Rufus calmly cleaned his rifle, every move deliberate. Then came the sound they feared, the clattering rattle of the tin cans. Rufus raised a hand for silence. They peered through the slats. Dust rose along the trail. 6 riders approached, surrounding the ranch like circling wolves. At their front rode Scarface eyes, scanning the house with malicious purpose. We're outnumbered, Rufus muttered. This won't be easy. Grace turned to Sam, voice trembling. I won't let you both die for me. Maybe if I go out. No, Sam snapped. We stand together. Outside, Scarface shouted. You've got her to Miss Stanford. Give her up now, and we'll spare the others. Otherwise, we burn it down. Smoke already curled around the porch. Someone had thrown a torch. Rufus raised his rifle and fired a warning shot that smacked into a post beside Scarface, forcing the men to scatter and return fire. Bullets slammed into the walls as the gun battle erupted. Inside, they crouched behind overturned furniture. Grace shielded her head, coughing as smoke seeped through the cracks. Flames licked at the edges of the porch. "We can't hold this place much longer," Sam shouted. Rufus fired again, then turned to them. "I'll cover you. There's a wagon in the barn, horses ready. Go out the kitchen window." Now Sam hesitated, jaw tight. "I'm not leaving you." "You must," Rufus growled. "If she gets out, this was worth it." "Go." Reluctantly, Sam pulled Grace toward the back of the house. Rufus kept up the noise, shouting insults and firing blindly to distract the attackers. Sam opened the pantry window and helped Grace through, then followed. A shot grazed his shoulder as they landed hard in the yard. They sprinted toward the barn, dodging gunfire. Sam's heart pounded his shoulder, stinging. At the barn, he found the wagon Rufus had prepped. He shoved Grace inside, leapt onto the seat, and cracked the reins. The horses bolted forward just as bullets tore into the barn doors. They burst through the gate and onto the open plain, dust rising in their wake. Behind them, 2 riders gave chase. Grace clung to the wagon side. "Where do we go, Cheyenne?" Sam said through gritted teeth. "We find the law, real law, and end this." Smoke wasn't behind them, curling into the sky like a warning. The ranch house, Rufus. Everything they had known for the past few days was in flames, but they were alive. And for now, that was enough. After 2 grueling days of travel, Sam and Grace finally approached the outer edges of Cheyenne, a bustling city brimming with rail cars, merchants, and the distant clang of progress. The frontier had shifted. Where wild pines once stood, industry now thrived. It offered the hope of safety, but also the risk that Grace's enemies could still reach them. They found a modest boarding house on the outskirts, registering under false names. Sam told the innkeeper they were newlyweds, hoping the common story would deflect suspicion. With little money left, he paid for 2 nights and bought simple clothes that would help them blend in. Grace, still weary from the flight, tried to rest, while Sam slipped out to send a coded telegram to her family lawyer, Samuel Caldwell, in San Francisco. The message was brief but urgent. Back in the room, Grace paced with worry. "Do you think he'll come?" she asked. "If he's the man you believe he is." "He'll come," Sam said quietly. The next evening a wire arrived. In Cheyenne. Grand Hotel. Protected. Come quietly. Sam read it aloud, a slow grin breaking across his face. "Caldwell's here." Grace clasped her hands to her chest, overwhelmed. That's a miracle." The Grand Hotel was a polished landmark of the city, complete with velvet curtains and pink marble columns. A doorman raised an eyebrow at their travel-worn appearances, but led them upstairs upon hearing Caldwell's name. Inside a well-furnished parlor, a silver-haired man rose to greet them. "Miss Stanford," he breathed, clasping Grace's hand in both of his. "Thank the heavens. I feared the worst." Grace's voice shook. "If not for Sam, I wouldn't be here." Caldwell turned to the miner. "Then we're in your debt, Mr. Harlow." They sat. As Grace recounted her journey, the ambush, the River Sam's rescue, Caldwell listened with rapt attention. He took notes, his face growing grim. "Your suspicions were well-founded," he said at last. "Your father's estate has been under pressure from several opportunists, the most dangerous of whom is Roland Jameson, a major investor with ties to political interests. He's been pushing to have you declared dead to claim control of your holdings. He ordered the ambush. Grace whispered, stunned. Likely Caldwell confirmed. But now we have leverage. I've brought documentation proving your father never intended Jameson to inherit. If we file these with the federal court in Denver, and you testify in person, we can freeze the contested assets and initiate a full investigation. Sam leaned forward. What about the men who chased us? They won't disappear because of paperwork. They won't need to, Caldwell said firmly. I've hired a Pinkerton detail. They'll escort us to Denver. Once there, the court can place you in protective custody if necessary. A cautious smile broke over Grace's face. It's almost over. Sam nodded, though his thoughts drifted to the burned ranch and the friend they'd left behind. I just wish Rufus could see this. Caldwell gave him a knowing look. His sacrifice won't go unrecognized. The law is finally on our side. The following day, Grace and Sam boarded a noon train bound for Denver. The polished brass and velvet trim were a stark contrast to the dust and gunfire of Prosper Gulch. Pinkerton agents stood watch at both ends of the car, scanning each stop for threats. They arrived in Denver without incident. At the courthouse, Grace gave her testimony, supported by Caldwell's extensive evidence. The judge, a stern man with spectacles and a weathered gavel, listened closely. By afternoon's end, an injunction was granted. Roland Jameson's assets were frozen. Arrest warrants followed. Grace was formally acknowledged as the rightful heir to her father's estate. 2 days later, news broke that Jameson had been apprehended trying to flee toward the Mexican border. Pinkerton agents confiscated documents, proving his connection to the ambush, sealing his fate. Outside the courthouse, Grace turned to Sam, her eyes shimmering with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. You saved me more than once. Sam, arms crossed and still wearing the same worn boots he'd dug for gold in, shook his head. Just live free. That's thanks enough. She stepped forward, embracing him. If you ever need anything you come find me. I will, he said softly. Later that day, Sam bought a one-way train ticket west, unsure if Prosper Gulch had anything left for him. But one thing was certain, he was no longer just a miner with a pon and a pickaxe. He was a man who had stood against greed, corruption, and death, and come out the other side with something more valuable than gold purpose. In a world where fortunes shift as quickly as the desert wind, Sam Harlow's act of compassion sealed his fate. Yet through danger and betrayal, he and Grace Stanford found allies, discovered hidden reserves of courage, and lit a spark of hope in a place darkened by greed. Their story reminds us that even in the harshest landscape, kindness and loyalty can outshine gold. Call to action. If you've been inspired by Sam and Grace's journey, one of resilience, friendship, and triumph over impossible odds, don't let it end here. Like this video, share it with fellow fans of gripping frontier tales, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama and stirring adventures. Your support keeps these stories alive, fueling the campfire of imagination for all who yearn for the thrilling spirit of the Old West. Saddle up and join us for the next adventure.